My fellow Americans, Laos is far away from America, but the world is small. Its 2 million people live in a country 3 times the size of Austria. The security of all Southeast Asia will be endangered if Laos loses its neutral independence. Its own safety runs with the safety of us all, in real neutrality, observed by all. I want to make it clear to the American people and to all the world that all we want in Laos is peace, not war.
My father was part of the heavy artillery unit. I actually stayed with him in his foxhole overlooking Long Tieng. When the communists infiltrated Long Tieng, he was out there firing his 105 and 155 guns. So I was out there with my father, and I'll be in the foxhole. So all I could hear was, all these constant bombardment, these cannons going off and rockets flying. During that time, at night, they would fire flares. And these flares, there'll be a little parachute that would glide it down. I mean, that's why it came down really slow. And so we, as kids, we would often seek out those parachutes for toys. After the conflict calmed down, the next day I woke up really early and went out and searched for those parachutes. And I got near the airfield and I saw these dead Vietnamese. It was all quiet and everything, so I decided probably not safe for me to be here, so I walked back home.
Home was a secret military base in the mountains of northern Laos called Long Tieng. The base was also known as headquarters for the CIA's clandestine operations in the country, commanded by General Vang Pao. To his forces, he was a George Washington-like figure.
General Vang Pao was not a person like us. He was a courageous and powerful man. Hmong people believed that the heavens sent Vang Pao to be our leader. To this day, Hmong people still honor and believe in Vang Pao.
General Vang Pao had a calling: fight against the violent North Vietnamese communist invasion of Laos. Few in the United States were aware that next door to the Vietnam War in Laos, the CIA was running a full-blown military operation, minus most of the U.S. armed forces. It was the so-called secret war. The communist Pathet Lao, with the backing of Ho Chi Minh's North Vietnamese army, were the enemy. Hmong, Khmer, Lao, Mien, and soldiers of all ethnicities defended Laos, with the help of some very powerful and secretive friends.
The war was run by the CIA and the State Department. So the State Department and the CIA are not part of the Department of Defense.
The secret war became a model for future war operations carried out by the CIA. The clandestine war in Laos killed tens of thousands of Laos citizens. Among the hardest hit were the Hmong of northern Laos. Tens of thousands died in the war. Even more lost their lives escaping to freedom after the war. While the Vietnam War was televised nightly, the secret war lingered in the shadows.
They are left at a village deep in enemy territory.
The reason when Laos was important was during that time, there was the Red Scare, right? So basically, fear communism. Communism gonna dominate Southeast Asia. We already have China there, and so you have North Vietnam. Now it's a communist state, and so if the country of Laos falls, then the rest of that region would fall to communism. It would turn red. So it's the domino theory, right? So if one domino falls, the rest of them would fall.
U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower was particularly concerned that if Laos fell, it would be a gateway to India, a communist domination of an entire hemisphere.
After the Geneva Conference in 1954, no one was supposed to be in Laos. North Vietnamese was using Laos as a staging area to resupply, and Laos was supposed to be neutral. No one is to touch the country of Laos.
In the end, neutralism was impossible.
The efforts of a communist-dominated group to destroy this neutrality never ceased. In the last half of 1960, a series of sudden maneuvers occurred, and the communists and their supporters turned to a new and greatly intensified military effort to take over.
And so the United States basically said, okay, so if North Vietnam's going to play this game, we can do the same thing. And instead of using our own troops, right, that we can use the indigenous people. And that's why Colonel Belair was sent over to train the Hmong people to fight as surrogate soldiers of the American armed forces, because they couldn't be there. Military forces can't be there, but they send CIA advisors.
Colonel Belair was, at that period of time, the CIA agent in Southeast Asia.
And when Belair got to Laos, the first person that he sought was General Vang Pao.
Colonel Belair came to ask him, Lieutenant Colonel Vang Pao, if the Royal Lao government send you ammunition, guns, I would like to ask you, if someday you and your Hmong people are going to turn the guns against the Royal Lao government, Colonel Vang Pao said that, Colonel Belair, I am an officer of the Royal Lao Army. My Hmong soldiers and I, we never turn our guns against our Royal Lao Army, and because of that, I asked you for help. 2 days after, the Royal Lao Army sent to military Dakota to drop ammunition and guns and food for Lieutenant Colonel Vang Pao and his soldiers.
In that moment, the U.S. and the Hmong became bound to one another, whether by choice or necessity, in a war to keep the communist North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao from overthrowing the Royal Lao government.
I think for the Hmong, what they really would want is just forget about the war. We don't want any part of it. You know, we just want to live free. They had to choose either the communists or the king in Vang Pao. Even if the communists ruled Laos or the king ruled Laos, it's the same for them. They're still a minority, right? They're still going to be discriminated against. They'd rather not pay the price if they don't have to. The fact that they ended up paying the price in northeastern Laos on both sides, you know, was because they were forced to choose, you know, one side or the other.
Nobody questioned whether it was a good or bad idea. During that time, it was mandatory. If you didn't let your family members, men and sons, get recruited, there were consequences.
The training team comes with Vang Pao.
If we became soldiers, then we would have shoes, clothes, and hats to wear, and receive monthly wages. We became soldiers so that we wouldn't be poor. During that time, I was still a young boy and only able to babysit children. I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
After I finished high school, I wanted to go to Vientiane to learn English, to become a teacher, and to teach the Hmong children in the villages. But because of this war, I had to let the dream go and became a soldier.
CIA operatives like Jerry Daniels worked hand in glove with General Vang Pao. General Vang Pao was Hmong, an ethnic group much persecuted by the dominant culture. They were sometimes called barbarians or male a holdover from the Chinese who chased them out of their country. The United States and General Vang Pao essentially ran the northern part of the secret war together. They were a powerful team.
We Hmong people didn't know why we were in this war and for what reasons. General Vang Pao sent word to the village heads to recruit soldiers. When we got to Padang for training, they taught us how to use knives and guns and told us that we were going to fight in the war. There were two goals. One goal was to protect the country from the Pathet Lao. The second goal was to help the Americans, but we didn't know why we were helping them.
The 57mm recoilless rifle is the ideal
The
weapon.
Hmong soldiers were trained in guerrilla tactics by Americans and Thai specialists. They were called Special Guerrilla Units, or SGUs.
So the SGUs are the toughest, the ones who die first, the ones who have to go, like the Marines, right? Like the American Marines that we always send first. In South Vietnam, the U.S. fought the conventional war tactics, and then the communists fought guerrilla tactics against the U.S. In Laos, it's completely opposite. The communists had the conventional war tactics, and then the Hmong used guerrilla tactics against them.
Soldiers were desperately needed, so training was a hurried affair.
On the third day, we learned how to shoot the 60 and 81 and throw grenades. We learned the basic training for 3 days and then went to war.
On the ground, the People's Army of North Vietnam, the Communists, were known for their unrelenting fighting style. When one soldier fell, others behind him kept coming. The SGUs responded in kind. Battles were fierce. Brutal injuries were common.
We were sent to a Phuket mountain. I still feel bad to this day. These soldiers didn't have the proper training. They were only here to try to make a living, and they were sent to battle. That day, we were on 2 helicopters. These helicopters were transporting us from Padang to Phuket Mountain. The first helicopter was filled with a group of Vu clan child soldiers. They were new, so they wanted to be in a group together. There were about 12 of them in the helicopter. As the helicopter started to land close to communist lines, everyone started jumping off. Before they all could get off, the communists threw grenades and they exploded near them. The helicopter swerved off immediately with 2 soldiers still in it. There were 8 child soldiers that died there. I still feel bad. They must have thought that they were safe because they were fighting together. But they all died.
The communists patrol the roads. One time, they shot at me and a bullet hit me right in the rib and lodged into my lung. They threw grenades and they exploded near me, hitting my arms. The bullet that hit me in my lung caused blood to rush up into my throat. I started to feel the blood clogging my throat, making it hard to breathe, so I spit it out. I had some medicine in my pocket, so I took it out and ate it. I also had some morphine, so I shot one in my arm. There was so much blood that I had to take off my shirt. I left my tank top on. I continued shooting at the communists so that they wouldn't be able to come get me. I wrapped up my wound and slowly walked away. I took off my canteens and belt and shoved a handful of bullets into my pocket. I held my M16 as I continued walking. A grenade then went off about 2 feet behind me. The logs behind me exploded into my back, butt, arms, hands, and legs. It was so hard to walk because of the pain, so I started crawling. The flies and leeches were everywhere. They were getting into my eyes and my wounds as I lay to rest for a while in my large pool of blood. I came upon a group of soldiers near a small hill and I called out to them. They were not a part of my group. They were Yao soldiers. I was sitting inside an abandoned communist bunker, and so when I called to them, they came to help me. There were 6 of them. They took me to their base where they put me by the campfire and told me to warm up here. My captain heard that I was at their base, so he and another soldier came to get me. My captain told me that we needed to leave because a helicopter was not able to pick me up here, and the communists were planning to attack this base tonight. I told them that I was in too much pain to walk. They continued to convince me that if we stayed, then we would get captured, and I had already suffered this far. I was in too much pain, so they told me they would carry me. As they held me up, I felt the bullet in my lung and all the wounds on my legs. It was so painful, I thought I was going to die. They both slowly carried me and we walked back to an area overnight. The next day, they attempted to airlift me, but they were unable to. So we waited for a second plane to come airlift me. They took me to Long Tieng, and then eventually to Nasu.
As in all wars, witnessing death pained the soul.
During war, when one of your soldiers or friends dies, there will be tears. But you think that it's him and it's not me. If you get hurt, you wonder, why me? Will my family see me again? You think about this all the time. During the time that I was in a leadership position, I sent the dead bodies back to their families, and they came and cried to me. They'd come and cry to me, and I didn't know what to do. I wiped their tears and take them to meet with General Ving Pao. I would tell General Ving Pao that my soldier died, and that this is their crying family. I asked if there was any financial assistance for them. They would get some money, and then I wouldn't see these families again. We had a group of widows. We would put their family name in this group, and there was someone that took care of their needs. This is what makes me sad.
While the special guerrilla units were in the midst of unforgiving hand-to-hand combat, air support and aerial assaults piled up more damage against the North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao. The Royal Lao Army supplied pilots, while the Americans supplied flight training and the T-28 planes used in battle. The CIA's Air America, a so-called charter airline, along with a secret group of officially unofficial U.S. Air Force pilots called the Ravens, provided forward air support. They spotted the enemy, relayed positions, and asked the T-28s to go after them. Radar and satellite tracking were crucial to air operations. Only in recent years has the U.S. acknowledged an isolated installation called Lima Site 85. To the Hmong who called the area home, it was Pupati. Lima Site 85 was run by the U.S. Air Force, the only place in Laos where Air Force personnel are publicly known to have served during the Secret War. More than half of all bombing operations against North Vietnam were guided by Lima Site 85. The small group of U.S. airmen and the Hmong soldiers who guarded the site were of tremendous importance to both the Vietnam War and the Secret War.
You know what the hell, how the Vietnamese soldiers do? At night only, they go over there and cut the throat of the American, the soldier or the officer American, all together over there. Yeah, Hmong too. All the soldiers over there, up there. That time, American, the CIA lost big, important place over there because the Vietnamese know exactly what they do over there.
During the war, most Hmong women were charged with the hard physical labor of keeping their family farms up and running, raising their children, and supplementing the family income in whatever way they could.
She had a little stall where she sold vegetables and things like that. And so my mother's stall was right by the airport. So every time the planes come in, you would see all these dust rising, planes landing, taking off constantly, all day long, and never stop.
A much smaller number of Hmong women worked away from home. Chua Tao was the first Hmong nurse trained as a medic to care for the wounded.
One night we're at the site, 72 is a small airport, and the American wrong the B-52, bombed by mistake in Long Tieng, and they brought 270 casualties to the hospital that night. No doctor there. Everybody go Vientiane. Only me and another Lao medic. So I told him that, hey, you and me, we had to run for 270 to check, hey, are you alert? Hey, are you bleeding? Are you leg or arm broken? We work very hard. And like I told General Wang Pao, I say, you better be nice to us. And one time he hit his finger. They tried to kill him on the back. They hit his finger because in Lao custom, or Lao belief, or Hmong belief that he had good protection with him. He yelling when the nurse is washing his tiny finger. Then I was angry. I go and hold his hand. I say, come on, General. You are my son-in-law because you marry one of my nurses, the best nurse. Listen. Then I hold his hand and I say, give me a syringe. They give me a syringe. I say, is that okay? He said, what are you going to do? I said, because yelling, I'm going to give medicine in here and not hurting you. Oh, no, I don't like the needle. I say, since General, the soldier cut off the arm, cut off the leg, I never see you. And now your tiny finger doesn't hurt. And he looked at me very strange. I said, stop looking at me. Stop looking at me like that. I want you to come and visit those soldiers sometime. But you are so busy, I never see you. Then after that, he come visit.
An NBC News crew captured the head of all Hmong forces, General Vang Pao, on one of his later visits. Since 1961, the Secret War had swallowed northern Laos. Losses were heavy on both sides. The Paris Peace Accords were signed in 1973, ostensibly putting an end to the war in Vietnam. Next door, General Vang Pao was pushing hard to continue fighting. The communist North Vietnamese and Pathet Lao had not let up. But a corner had been turned. The U.S. wanted out of Southeast Asia, and that included Laos.
Finally, they signed the Vientiane Peace Accord on February 21st, 1973.
The two sides, the communists and the Royal Lao government, were to jointly rule Laos with a third group, neutralists, providing a middle ground. All were to be equal. It was a tenuous arrangement, enemies coming together to rule. But after decades of war, the people of Laos had hope. They created a representative Congress called the National Political Consultative Council. The leaders of the three parties were meeting regularly. Optimism was in the air.
I was asked by the Royal Lao government to be part of a task force to plan for the future. My task force and I went to do workshop from North Laos to South Laos to plan for national reconciliation, social and economic development. And everywhere I went, I saw the population was very happy to see peace coming.
Laos citizens were officially going to be at peace for the first time since the start of the French Indochina War in the 50s. But the North Vietnamese and the Pathet Lao were secretly making plans to forcibly take the country. General Vang Pao's headquarters at Long Tieng were a prized target. If the communists could take it, then a march into the capital of Vientiane was almost certain. Communist forces spent months sending thousands of soldiers to surround Long Tieng. Then they waited for word to attack. It was mid-May 1975. Saigon and Cambodia had both already fallen. General Vang Pao was said to have known that they were coming. He was ready to stay and fight, but the CIA ordered him to make a clandestine escape to safety in Thailand. No one was to know, for fear of the chaos his absence could cause. His closest soldiers engineered his escape by first getting him out of his house.
When we got to the steps, I took off my hat because it had a large brim and put it on him. I held onto his arm and we walked side by side towards my car. We popped the smoke signal and yellow smoke rose to the sky. The American U.S. aid helicopter was already circling in the river valley, waiting for us. They circled up and landed next to the fish pond. The general started to enter with one foot and used both hands to hold onto the bars above his head, and then he stepped back down. I don't know what he was thinking. He points his finger to the sky and spins it around. He then stamped his foot twice on the ground and got on the helicopter. The door closed and the helicopter took off. At that time, I felt like I could have died. I was sad, and to this day, I still feel disappointed because he had always said, "You will go with me." When the helicopter took off, he left me behind. My hope was completely gone, and I thought, he left me, and this is it. I really felt as though I died.
While General Vang Pao's escape was meant to be secret, word got out. Those who could made their way to Long Tieng in hopes of getting a flight to safety too. Grandparents, cousins, aunts, and uncles were gathered together to make the trek through the mountains to Long Tieng.
It was very chaotic during that time. And when we got there, it was several thousand people were all waiting there. And then soon, the plane started to come. And then it landed, and then people were just like... Little did we know that those planes were only reserved for military officers. In fact, General Vang Pao said that each of those planes was designated for a colonel. When the plane landed, and they said, "This is Colonel Sandang Xiong's airplane." And so my dad said, "Okay, if it's Colonel Sandang Xiong, it's airplane, then let's go." And so everybody flocked, and then they, these C-46, quite high, so you need to climb the stairs all the way to the door. And so they pushed us, and then my dad pushed us. My mom got in, my brothers got in, I got in, and then they closed the door. And it was like sardines in that C-46. You could probably fit about 30 people in there, but must have had been over 100 people in there. When we arrived in Nampong, we got out and looked around, and where's my dad, where's my brother, where's my grandma, grandpa, and aunts and uncle. We looked around and didn't see them. And I remember waiting at the airport with my mom to see when the next plane's gonna land and whether my dad and my grandma and grandpa was gonna step off. So waited until like 9 o'clock or so, and the C-130 came. And the C-130 landed, and my dad and grandma and grandpa came out.
The communist forces took over Long Tieng on May 15, 1975, and seized power in the capital of Vientiane just 3 months later. As one war ended for the Hmong, another began. This one was a fight to get out of the country and then onto France, America, Australia, or whichever country would take the refugees.
During the time when Vang Pa was still in Laos, for me, life was very normal. It didn't seem like a war. What seemed like a war was afterwards.
Only a fraction of those who wanted to escape were able to get out. The rest had to stay and plot other ways to leave the country, for they were in danger. The communists had declared that the Hmong were to be hunted and killed because they worked for the much-hated United States. If they surrendered and cooperated, they would be sent to seminar or re-education camps.
Indoctrination, torture, deprivation, food deprivation especially, where you're giving, just very minimal rice and water, called in daily to be beaten, psychologically tortured, where they would pull the gun to your head, like Russian roulette type of things, and you never know when the bullet is going to hit you, and if you survive it, then they take you back to your barracks, and the next day it starts over.
Rather than surrender, entire multi-generational families spent years hiding where they knew best, in the dense mountain forest or in remote villages on the highest mountaintops, like Pumbea. Always on the move, alert for the next phalanx of communist soldiers.
My father had already anticipated, the attack because he had military experience. So every night we would go sleep in our field houses rather than stay in the village, because he knew that they were going to attack the village at any moment. At the actual time of the attack, we were actually in our fields on a mountain that overlooks the village. So, I watched from the mountain the village being bombed and attacked. And all the villagers, some of them killed, others scattered. After that, we just ran from our field houses, up to Pumbea, like run further up. I ran out of food, just like eating roots and whatever we could find in the jungle. And then the communists just kept coming, just kept attacking us as we're running. We went around the mountain twice. All the men left because they felt that if they stayed and they were captured, they would definitely be killed. And then they told the women to go surrender. So we came back to our village and then we surrendered to the communists. So after that, we lived with the communists for a whole year.
Surviving in communist villages meant wrenching choices. The Her family, Mom, Kuyang, and Dad, Sia Ying, were perilously close to not having their daughter Sia make it to America.
During that time, we were so depressed. We didn't know whether we were going to die today or tomorrow. We were poor and starving. Those of us living in the village were so poor and scared. We were afraid of being killed by the Pathet Lao. We're also afraid that the Pathet Lao are going to find and kill my father and our husbands in the jungle. We were afraid of everything. During that time, my sister-in-law was pregnant, I was pregnant, and my cousin was pregnant. My father and the men lived in the jungles, and when we were pregnant, we were afraid that the Pathet Lao would know that my father and his men were close, and that was how we became pregnant. I was pregnant with you for about 2 months. Everyone started telling me that I should find some medicine to abort you. They said that we might have trouble with the Pathet Lao, so I decided to find some medicine to abort you. We're all afraid that the Pathet Lao would investigate and cause trouble for us. So that's why we decided to abort. My sister-in-law and cousin changed their minds and decided not to. They decided that they were willing to take a risk, regardless of what the Pathet Lao would do. But I decided that I would still abort.
I knew that your mom was pregnant with you, but we were afraid that the communists were going to cause problems for your mom. So I also agreed to finding medicine to abort.
I sought out people who were known to have medicine that aborts babies. They guaranteed that it would work. They gave me their best medicine, but for some reason, it didn't work. I gave birth to Sia in December. Back then, we gave birth in the jungles. When I gave birth to Sia, I knew that I drank too much of the medicine. Sia was black and blue when she was born. As I continued to care for her and raise her, she got older. The black and blue colors slowly went away, and she continued to get bigger without any problems.
Whether families surrendered or hid in the jungles, the ultimate goal was escape. Groups of people and sometimes entire villages crept through the forests, evading the enemy on their way out of the mountains to the lowland riverbanks of the Mekong River.
Avoiding towns and roads, going through the jungle, literally hacking the jungle, with knives, and then women and children falling behind. And eventually we did hit the Mekong.
On the other shore, miles away, was Thailand and freedom from certain death.
My father said the trip to the Mekong, for me, it was just like, one suffering after another. I don't have memory of how many days, but my father said it actually took us 28 days because we got lost twice, We got lost twice. First, we ran into a pack of elephants, and some people were attacked and wounded, and then our guides left us behind. Next, we ran into a military fort. The people in front were attacked. A lot of people was killed. The next big obstacle was, how do we cross it? Of course, there's no boats. We have no idea where we were along the Mekong.
The river was also patrolled by the Pathet Lao soldiers like these who were interviewed for a documentary by the French television channel TF1.
Si les Méos traversent le Mekong, est-ce que vous les arrêtez ou est-ce que vous tirez sur eux?
On tire. Ce n'est pas moi qui donne l'ordre de tirer. Ce sont nos supérieurs qui nous ont confié la mission de contrôler cette frontière du pays. Nous devons appliquer à la lettre leurs instructions. Ces groupes de Méos, si l'ordre est de les massacrer, nous les massacrerons tous.
The Pathet Lao weren't the only threat. Many Hmong did not know how to swim, and with a fast-moving river as wide as 2 miles, many people drowned.
So my father said, okay, chop down as much bamboo as we can carry, come back, use that, as floats.
Years later, people made story cloths, or pandao, to process their experiences.
Put 2 poles, in triangle like this, and it fit another pole, and it fits right under your armpit. And then you put another pole right behind it, and you get in there, and tie in. And then they strung the bamboos together, so one family would be floating together. We waited until nightfall, and then we just plunge right into the river and swim, literally swim for your life.
Even tiny things like crying babies were a mortal danger. Silence meant survival.
It was 1979 in March. We had our third child, who was a little girl. We were about to escape to Thailand. As we got closer to the Mekong River, everyone in our group agreed that we would be unhappy with anyone who had a crying child, which would have given away our location and gotten us killed. We didn't give opium to the older two. We gave opium to our youngest one, who was about 16 days old. After we gave her some liquid opium, she became unconscious as if she died. After we crossed the river to Thailand, she did wake up. So we continued to heal her and cure her with medicine.
Not everyone was lucky. Children and the elders were especially vulnerable.
When we crossed the Mekong, my dad actually put me with two other relatives of ours. So I was actually separated from my family, and I got to Thailand, I was actually alone. My biggest fear was that my parents would die, right? They would be shot, especially my dad. And now they're really gone. So I was just thinking like, oh my God, I could be an orphan. And somehow I knew that there was a Ban Vinai, and my parents had told me that I had an aunt there. So then I was thinking like, wow, I may have to go to Ban Vinai and find my aunt.
Thai soldiers and aid workers patrolled the Mekong in order to collect those who made it across. Over 50,000 Hmong were estimated to have died trying to get into Thailand, more than were killed during the war. French television's TF1 documentary crew happened upon some Hmong refugees as they first stepped foot into Thailand. Survivors were taken to temporary camps to wait for permanent placement in a refugee camp.
There'll be loads and loads of buses that would keep coming, and I was just sitting there looking at the people that, disembarked from the bus and thinking, where's my mom, where's my dad, And every bus that came, I didn't see them. And then finally I saw my mom came out. And I remember the relief, and I just ran toward her and I was just crying, and my mom was crying too because she thought I had died,
There were 29 refugee camps scattered across Thailand, with the northern ones home to most of the Hmong refugees. Minnesota was one of the states that Hmong refugees sought out. Local TV station WCCO sent a crew to document Ban Vinai, the largest of the Hmong refugee camps. With around 40,000 people, the population of a small city crammed onto 400 acres. To say it was crowded was an understatement. Each family was assigned a tiny living space with virtually no privacy.
There were many people living here. There were the educated, wealthy, and poor people here. There were also the good, the bad, and enemies. We all lived here together. We lived in poor conditions. No bathrooms and bad hygiene. If you needed to poop or pee, you would have to dig holes for yourself. Water was not good to drink. These were some things that everyone struggled heavily with. Living here, there was a lot of illness and death. Everyone was faced with death and loss. The path that we took to bury the dead, there was not one day where we didn't carry the dead to be buried.
Thai officials wielded incredible power over the Hmong in the camps.
In the mornings, they would blare the Thai national anthem, and on the radio, and you're supposed to stand, right? Stand at attention with your hand, of course, over your heart. And Hmong people, they don't have that kind of practice. They never saluted,
They had a rule where if you move while the national anthem is being played, whether you were a child or an adult, they would either hit you or they could put you in jail for a period of 24 hours. And I remember probably one time I moved. For days and nights, I had this nightmare about some Thai officer coming in and carting me off.
I did witness some beating, right, where the Thai police would be in there. People didn't stand, they continued doing what they want. And then they would just pick some guy and beat him up.
Kids did a lot of growing up in the camps.
I remember going to the market with my father in the camp.
Yeah.
They would play these Thai songs. I remember your favorite singer, Dao Bandong. Right. And that market was the first time I heard him sing. And I was looking at some yams. And the only reason why I remember that particular yam really well was because I was examining it. Only because the song was on and my father looked really sad and I didn't want to look at his face. So I looked at this fruit that was in front of me. I remember that fruit because of that scene in that market.
Some families spent more than a decade in the refugee camps. Children were born there. People married. Neighborhoods were created, all the while waiting for their names to show up on a list of families approved to leave. And even then, it wasn't simple.
Our name came up twice. We didn't want to come. Family was divided into two. It was my parents, right? And then it was my grandma and grandpa and my aunts and uncle. So if we were to leave, what's going to happen to them? What if they didn't get to come, right? And so that was the fear. Here we are, we came all the way here. We're going to leave them here, and we're going to go to America and a country we know nothing about. We don't even know where it is, right? Or what state we're going to be in. Finally, my dad decided, okay, let's go. So we came on October 22nd, 1976.
I remember the first time we walked to this place to look at that list, and my father didn't see our name on it. And that was when I knew that going to America was really important for my father.
Reaching the United States after years of surviving endless war brought one level of relief. The daily chance of dying fell dramatically. But the absence of immediate trauma released long-suppressed fears and emotions.
My father was really depressed when we first came. I think it's hardest for the men.
Hmong men don't want to admit anything, right? And so he may not want to say, I'm suffering from, and we don't have a word for mental health in the Hmong community, in the Hmong language. And so the only word for mental health, the only equivalent is the person is crazy. And so you don't want to be labeled as a crazy person, I'm suffering through this.
When I sleep, I sometimes scream and yell, and my wife wakes me up and asks me, "What's wrong?" I would tell her that I dreamt that we were still at war. Sometimes when there's a loud noise, it startles me and reminds me of the bombs that the communists shot towards us. For over 41 years, these things haven't disappeared from my head. When I think about these things, I feel my body get all warm. I've been controlling myself, and so I haven't talked to any doctors.
You're always on the alert, and even to this day, I tell my wife and I tell my children, in the middle of the night, don't just come screaming into my room because you put me in that mode, right? And this is where the PTSD comes into play, right? I think I may suffer, I may have PTSD because if in the middle of the night, if people come in and scream and yell, I would just stand right up. I was just like, what's going on, And if that's, I'm experiencing that, just imagine someone in the battlefield.
They are still living with a war that hasn't ended for them.
Soldiers also have to live with old war wounds.
My wounds still hurt. 2 bullets have gone through my body, but the one that hit my rib is still lodged in my lung. All the shrapnel in my body is still painful when I work, so I can't do a lot of hard work. I wanted them to take the bullet out of my lung. The doctor said it was 50-50. If the bullet was in my body for this long and hasn't killed me, and surgery might kill me 50-50, then I would prefer not to do it.
In 1971, I got hit on the head by a bullet from an AK gun. It cut a piece of my brain. Right now, on this side of my head, it feels numb. My memory is not that great anymore. So if you are learning something, you don't remember it after a while. Talking like this is fine, but when we talk about learning something, you sometimes forget.
Hmong soldiers are not considered U.S. veterans. They receive no veterans benefits, even though they were paid by the American CIA.
One Hmong that died in Laos meant one American from South Vietnam going home. Because we prevented the North Vietnamese army from going into South Vietnam to massacre the Americans down there.
Towards the end of this war, there were more than 35,000 Hmong in Laos that died on behalf of the Americans. We didn't value our own lives. We were more than happy to die for the Americans. This is what we did. To be frank, this was a secret war. The Americans kept us a secret, and the whole world didn't know. After we lost the war, the whole world knew about the sacrifices we made for the Americans. We were their soldiers, and we fought for them in secret.
What's difficult is that the Hmong did not officially serve. When you look at the conditions, right? Did you serve officially as an American, GI, right? No. And so it was through the CIA, which is not a military, it's not a military branch. Many of the veterans have been fighting since the 80s to obtain veterans benefits.
We don't receive anything. Right now, what we have been lobbying and asking for is benefits. We want benefits to help with health care. Whatever the American Vietnam veterans get in benefits, we would like the same. We also want burials for our dying soldiers. We want to be buried in the cemetery with other soldiers. We hope that one day America will recognize our efforts during the war.
They say
that we are Hmong soldiers, but we really are U.S. soldiers. We want the SGU soldiers to be happy when their sacrifices are recognized by America and that they are actual soldiers. We don't want to be looked at as crazy, that we just wanted to be soldiers, but we really wanted to help out the Americans.
So I don't know whether we should hold our breath. Not many of these veterans are around, and they're dying off every single day. And many of the policy witnesses are all dead.
俾共和羅蒙嘅美間 collision 多可能，他多火高，天河高我肉高。
I don't know why it's so difficult, why we're caught up in this bureaucratic paperwork. You know, do the morally right thing, I think. There's got to be this moral thing where, you know what, we can look at, okay, fine, you know, we know you served, we know you did this. It's no longer a secret war. The CIA declassified lots of these documents where the president say, recruit more Hmong people. Even Ambassador Sullivan, you know, basically said, we funded these people. We shipped them the supplies. We fed them. We clothed them. They are all people. This is from the ambassador that ran the war. You know, what more do you need? You know, and they get caught up in this bureaucratic paperwork. We served the United States of America. We protected Americans' interest. We died protecting Americans' interest. Why the feet dragging and the closed lips? This is 41 years later.